You've heard of haunted forests, but the Forest of Dean? That's a different kind of dark. It's in the West Country, near the border of Wales, and it's been whispering secrets for centuries. It's not just trees and trails, it's a place where the past clings to the land. The locals say the forest is alive, and it doesn't take kindly to outsiders. But the real ghosts here aren't just stories. They're tied to a tragedy that happened over 100 years ago when children vanished without a trace. Now, I know what you're thinking, what kind of children would be called hollow? That's what I asked the locals, and they just smiled and said, "You'll see." So come along now, and let's step into the Forest of Dean, where the wind carries echoes of laughter and the trees watch with ancient eyes. You know, the Forest of Dean isn't just a place on a map, it's a living memory, older than the church bells and deeper than the roots of the ancient oaks. It's where the stories begin, and the whispers are never far behind. The Dean is a place where the old ways still linger. The people who lived here back in the 1700s were not just farmers and hunters, they were keepers of a secret that the forest itself seemed to guard. The legend starts with a child named Alice, a girl who was never seen again after she wandered too far into the woods. Her parents, desperate and grieving, began to offer small gifts to the forest: bread, honey, and even a silver locket. They believed the forest had taken her, and that the only way to bring her back was to leave something behind. But what they didn't know was that they were offering a place for more children to come quietly, silently, and never to return. The stories say the forest takes the children in exchange for something else. Not just food, but memory and time, and the warmth of a family. It's a deal the forest never breaks, and the Dean has never forgotten. You remember the first time you heard the whispers in the trees just before the storm. A child's voice, soft and lost, calling your name from the edge of the forest. You turned, but there was no one there, only the wind weaving through the branches. The next morning, the local newspaper had a story about a missing boy, no older than 10. His parents said he'd gone to the woods to chase a fox, and never came back. The forest had swallowed him whole, they said, like it always did. The townsfolk began to speak in hushed tones. The forest had taken more than one child in the past decade. They called them the hollow children, those who vanished without a trace and never returned. Some said they were spirits, others said they were never there at all. One by one, the children disappeared. No footprints, no screams, just silence where there should have been life. And always, it seemed, the forest was watching, waiting for the next child to wander too far from the path. You've heard the whispers, but now you're standing at the edge of the forest, where the trees seem to close in like ancient sentinels. The air is thick, and every rustle in the underbrush feels like a child's laughter echoing from somewhere just beyond the veil. In 1963, a family of 5 vanished without a trace, leaving behind only their belongings and the single, blood-stained boot. No one knows what happened, but the woods have never been the same since that day. The locals say the children were playing a game that ended in terror. Some say they were taken by the forest itself. Others claim they were lured by the sound of their own voices, calling for help from the trees. Even now, the forest seems to remember. The wind whispers through the trees, and sometimes, if you're quiet enough, you can hear the faintest sound of children laughing just before the silence returns, heavier than it was before. The Forest of Dean has many secrets, but this one has remained buried for decades. Still, the trees seem to guard the memory, and the air here feels colder than the rest of the woods. You can almost feel the weight of their absence. And so, the forest watches, it remembers, and it waits for the next child to come too close and for the next story to be told. I still remember the first time I heard about the hollow children, back when I was just a girl visiting the Forest of Dean with my grandmother. She told me about the children who vanished into the woods and never returned, their laughter echoing like wind through the trees. Years later, I met a retired teacher who claimed she saw them, dozens of children, no older than 8, playing in the woods one autumn evening. She said they were smiling, but their eyes were empty, like they had no soul. One man, a former ranger, swore he saw them running through the forest at night, their voices like whispers in the wind. He said they never ran from him, just kept going deeper into the woods, like they were being called by something unseen. Even the local priest, who was known for his strictness, admitted he had a dream about the children. He said they were not in pain, just waiting for something or someone. It's hard to say if these are real, or just stories passed down like a lullaby. But the Forest of Dean has a way of making you feel watched, like the children are still out there, waiting for you to come closer. We followed the trail of old maps and whispered legends, and the first thing we found was a crumbling stone gate, half buried in ivy, its iron hinges rusted shut like the eyes of a forgotten god. The gate led to a narrow path, flanked by trees that seemed to lean in, whispering secrets we couldn't understand. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. Inside, we found the remnants of a child's toy, a wooden horse with a cracked saddle, tucked beneath a gnarled root. It was older than the trees, older than the stories. Further in, we discovered a hidden cellar, its entrance sealed with a stone slab inscribed with symbols that didn't match any known language. It felt like a message left behind by the forest itself. The final clue came from the old folk who still live in the area. They spoke of a place where children vanish, not taken, but invited. A place the forest remembers. And so we left, hearts heavy, with more questions than answers, and a feeling that the forest was watching, waiting for us to return or for the children to return. You've heard the names, you've seen the maps, but there's one thing that's always lingered like a whisper in the wind. What exactly did they take from those children? The local historians said it wasn't just the children who vanished, but something else, something that left them hollow. Not broken at all, just empty. Every time someone returns to the forest, they swear they hear laughter, but not from the trees, not from the wind. It's from the space where the children once were. And still, no one has ever found the missing thing. No bones, no toys, no footprints, just silence and the feeling that something was never meant to be found. So here's the thing, dear listener, maybe it's not about what they took. Maybe it's about what they left behind and how it's still waiting to be found. You ever wonder why the elders in the Forest of Dean always seem to know when the children are missing? They say the trees whisper the names and the stones remember the faces. Some say the hollow children were never real, just the nightmares of parents who lost their own kids. But others swear they're still out there, dancing in the moonlight, waiting for the next child to wander too close. Local lore says the children are drawn to the places where people have lost hope. If you hear their laughter in the woods, you'd better not be alone, and you'd better not be looking for them. Even today, some locals say they can feel the children's presence when the forest is quiet. They don't come to harm, they come to remind us some things never grow up. You've heard the tales of the hollow children, but what if the truth is stranger than fiction? No one knows exactly what happened in that forest in 1922, and the local sheriff's file is still sealed. Did they vanish, or were they never there to begin with? The last witness, a farmer named Thomas, died in 1987, and his testimony was never fully recorded. He claimed he saw them barefoot, silent, with eyes like empty sockets, walking in a line through the woods, never stopping, never speaking. Some say the children were never real, that the forest itself is a living memory, and the hollow children are just the forest's way of remembering those who walked it before. A warning, perhaps, to those who forget to tread lightly. And so we return to the forest, to the place where the truth was buried long ago. We don't know if the children were real, or if they were just a dream, but we do know this, the forest still remembers. You've felt it, haven't you? That lingering chill as the forest seems to hold its breath, waiting for something or someone to return. The children never left the Dean. They were never meant to, and yet they walk among us, unseen, unheard, but ever present. Some say the forest is a mirror. It reflects our fears, our regrets, our buried truths. And in that mirror, the children are always watching. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something to enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dub 5 smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. So, as you walk your own path, remember, the forest doesn't forget, and neither do they. But I digress. There's more to tell, and the next tale is one that will chill you to your core. You've heard of the Priory of Sion, haven't you? A place whispered about in the shadowy corners of history, where secrets have lain buried for centuries. It's said to be more than a ruin, it's a place that remembers. Nestled deep in the hills of France, it's a place where time seems to stand still. The stones are cold, and a wind carries the scent of damp earth and old secrets like a forgotten lullaby. It's not just the architecture that lingers, it's the silence. A silence so thick, it feels like it's waiting for something. Like the walls are holding their breath, holding onto a story they can't tell. Some say the priory was a refuge for the last of the Knights Templar, hiding their knowledge and their faith from the world. Others say it's a trap, a place where the past still lives and the present is just a visitor. But what's it really hiding? A secret? A spirit? Or just the weight of history pressing down on the stones? That's what we're about to uncover, one whisper at a time. Now, let's step back in time to the 12th century when the Priory of Sion was first built on this windswept hill. It was a place of learning, a sanctuary for scholars and mystics, but also a place where secrets were buried deeper than the earth. The monks who lived here were not just men of faith, they were also keepers of ancient knowledge, passing down wisdom through coded manuscripts and whispered traditions. Some say they were the last true guardians of the sacred arts. But not all who came to the priory were welcome. There were those who sought to claim its secrets for themselves, and those who were lost within its walls, disappearances that have never been explained, even to this day. The priory's story is not just about power or knowledge. but about the people who lived and died within its stone embrace. Some say the echoes you hear are not just wind, but the voices of those who never left. So, as we continue our journey, we'll uncover the truth behind these echoes and the people who once called this place home. But first, let's take a moment to consider, what if the Priory's silence is not a lack of sound, but a sound too powerful to be heard? You remember the first time you noticed something was off. A faint chill, a shadow that didn't belong, a silence that lingered too long. It was like the air itself had shifted, holding its breath. Then came the whispers, soft, like wind through dry leaves. They didn't carry meaning, just the weight of something watching, waiting. You couldn't tell if they were in your head or coming from the walls. The clock stopped. Not just pause, but stopped entirely. The hands frozen at midnight, the ticking gone. You checked it again, and it was still silent. Something had changed the rhythm of time itself. Then the lights dimmed. Not just dim, but disappeared. You reached for the switch, but the switch was gone. The darkness was too complete, too deep, as if the room had been pulled into another world. And finally, the silence. Not the kind that comes after a storm, but the kind that makes your bones ache. You couldn't hear your own heartbeat. You couldn't hear anything at all. You see it now, don't you? The moment the sky turned from blue to ash gray, and the air grew heady with the weight of something old and watching. The wind carried not just sound, but whispers soft, like a child's lullaby, but with a hollow edge. The last witness, a farmer named Elias, said he saw a light, no, not light, but something that glowed like a dying ember, flickering above the ruins. He didn't chase it, not then. He said he felt it watching him, and it had eyes that didn't blink. They found his journal later, buried beneath the roots of the old oak. The last entry was a question, not a statement. Did I run, or did I fall? Did I leave, or was I taken? What did I see, and why can't I remember? And so, the Priory still waits. The wind still whispers, and if you're ever lost in the dark, you might hear too a voice, not from the past, but from the present calling you home. I met an old man who swore the walls of the Priory still hum with the voices of the lost. He said the wind carries their whispers, especially when the moon is full and the trees seem to lean in. He told me about the woman who lived there for years, never leaving the grounds. She said she could hear them children laughing, a woman weeping, and a man screaming in the night. She never saw them, but she felt them. She never left the Priory again. The last time she was seen, she was sitting on the stone steps, staring at the sky, her hands clasped in front of her, as if waiting for something. The townspeople say she was trying to find the truth behind the disappearances, but some say she found it too late, and the Priory took her in, just like it took the others. Even now, some claim to hear her voice in the wind, a soft, feminine whisper calling for help. But when you turn around, there's nothing but the silence of the old stones. The investigators arrived with notebooks and quiet reverence, as if stepping into a sacred space. They moved like ghosts themselves, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls, their breaths shallow in the cold, ancient air. In the library, they found a desk covered in papers, some yellowed with age, others still fresh. There were names, dates, and symbols scrawled in hurried, desperate handwriting like a final message left behind by someone who knew they were about to vanish. One document spoke of a hidden chamber beneath the floorboards, a place where the last members of the Order had met in secret. They'd left behind a cryptic map, its lines faded but still legible, as if waiting for someone to follow its path. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to hum with something unseen. It was as if the walls themselves were whispering, not in words, but in feelings, a sense of loss, of urgency, of a final, unspoken truth waiting to be uncovered. And then, in the silence, they heard it a sound like a door creaking open, though no door was there. It was the first time the Priory had ever spoken to anyone in over 500 years. You know, there's one thing about the Priory of Sion that still haunts me. Not the ghosts, not the history, but a single detail that no one has ever explained. It's like a whisper in the dark, just out of reach. It's the way the monks kept records, but never the names of the people they were protecting. No names, just symbols. You'd think that with all the secrets they were hiding, they'd have at least one name to remember. You think they were hiding identities to protect their people? Maybe. But why leave behind something so carefully crafted, so precisely placed? It's like they were trying to tell us something, but not in words. And that's the thing, isn't it? We're always chasing the ghosts, the secrets, the stories. But sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't what you see, it's what you never understand. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what the locals really think? They say the wind carries the whispers of the old ones, and the trees remember more than they should. Some say the Priory's stones are still warm to the touch at midnight, as if the past is still breathing beneath the earth. Others insist the well never runs dry, even in the driest summer. There's a theory, whispered in the back of taverns, that the Priory wasn't destroyed at all. Some say it's still there, hidden beneath the soil, waiting for the right moment to rise again. And then there are the children. They know the stories better than the grown-ups. They say the priory isn't just a place, it's a person, and it's been waiting for someone to listen. And still, the truth remains just out of reach, like a whisper in the wind. We know the priory was more than a monastery, it was a place where secrets were buried deeper than the earth. The last known member of the order vanished in 1492, leaving behind only a cryptic letter and a ledger filled with strange symbols. No one has been able to decipher it, and no one dares to try. The priory's fate remains a puzzle, its mystery untouched by time. Some say it was a place of enlightenment, others a den of heresy. But the truth, it's still locked away, waiting for someone to find it. And so, we return to the echo, the whisper, the lingering question. What did they truly guard within those walls? And why does it still call to us, even now? You wandered through the mist of the priory's secrets, and now the silence feels heavier than ever. There's something about the way the wind whispers through those ancient stone walls, like it's carrying a message only the stones can understand. Sometimes, the most powerful ghosts aren't the ones you see, but the ones you feel in the space between your breaths. Like the air itself holds a memory you can't quite place. You've heard the echoes, but have you ever wondered what the priory is trying to tell you? Maybe it's not a story of the past, it's a warning for the present. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. But don't worry, dear listener, there's more to come. And if you're feeling a little uneasy, that's just the ghosts doing their job. After all, they're the only ones who remember the truth. You've heard of the Ritz Paris, that glittering jewel on the Champs-Élysées. But have you ever wondered what happens when the lights go out and the music stops? What secrets linger in the velvet drapes and gilded mirrors? This isn't just a hotel. It's a place where the wealthy once danced under chandeliers, where the air was thick with perfume and ambition, and where whispers of tragedy have long been carried through the halls. There are no official records of any deaths here, but the rumors are as rich as the pastries in the dining room. The Ritz Paris has a history of secrets and the silence that follows them. So, what do you think? Is it the grandeur that lingers, or the sorrow, or maybe the blood? You've heard the name Ritz Paris, but do you know how it came to be? It started with a man named César Ritz, a Swiss hotelier with a flair for the dramatic and a love for luxury. He dreamed of a place where the elite could gather, sip champagne, and dance until dawn. Ritz envisioned a palace for the wealthy, a space where every detail would be perfect, crisp linens, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of service that made you feel like royalty. He partnered with Emile Garnier, an architect who believed in beauty and grandeur, and together they built something unforgettable. The opening in 1903 was a spectacle. The ballrooms were packed with glittering gowns, tuxedos, and the kind of energy that made the air buzz with excitement. It wasn't just a hotel, it was a cultural hub where art, fashion, and power mingled like wine and perfume. But behind the glamour was a world of secrets. The Ritz became a meeting ground for spies, politicians, and lovers. Some say the walls still remember the whispers of those who once gathered there, their voices echoing in the silence between the chandeliers. Even the ghosts of the past can't escape the grandeur. Some say the walls still hold the echoes of laughter, of scandal, of love, and of the blood that once stained the marble beneath the dancing feet of the elite. You remember the first time you noticed something wasn't quite right. It was a Tuesday, the chandeliers were glowing, and the piano player was playing a waltz. But the music had a strange rhythm, like it was counting something no one else could hear. The guests were dressed in their finest, but their laughter felt hollow. It was like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next note to fall out of sync with the world. The staff started acting strange too. The maitre d' kept glancing at the doors like he was expecting someone to walk in who wasn't supposed to be there. And the waiters passed around glasses of champagne with a nervous edge to their smiles. Even the mirror seemed to change. One morning, when you stepped into the ballroom, you saw your reflection staring back, but it wasn't you. It was someone else, someone who had been there before and had never left. And that's when you realized the ballroom wasn't just hosting a party anymore. It was hosting a memory, one that had been waiting for decades to be remembered. You know, the Ritz Paris isn't just a place of elegance and luxury, it's also a place of secrets. And one of the darkest secrets in its history is the night of the infamous disappearance. It was 1947, and the ballroom was packed with the glittering elite of Paris. But beneath the laughter and clinking glasses, something sinister was brewing. The letter was a final plea, a desperate message that never reached its intended recipient. And when the night ended, she vanished without a trace, leaving only whispers behind. No one knows where she went or why she left. But the Ritz Paris still remembers. And sometimes, when the lights flicker just right, you can hear her whispering in the silence. I once met a woman who said she saw a figure in the ballroom, wearing a white dress, but the dress was stained with something dark. She swore it moved like it was alive, like it was trying to escape. She said the figure looked like it was caught between two moments, half in the past, half in the present, and when she tried to follow, it vanished into the crowd like it had never been there. Another guest, a retired journalist, claimed he heard a voice in the chandeliers whispering names he didn't recognize. He said the voice would stop when he turned his head, but it would start again the moment he looked back. He wrote it off as a trick of the mind, but he said the voices kept him awake for weeks. And when he finally left, he swore the chandeliers were still whispering in the dark. There's something about the Ritz that lingers, even when the lights are off and the guests have left. It doesn't just haunt the walls, it haunts the people who remember. And if you listen closely, you might hear it too. The whisper of a name, the rustle of a dress, the echo of a dance still playing, long after the music stopped. We followed the trail of whispers to the archives, where the dust had settled over decades of secrets. The caretaker, a quiet man with a voice like old paper, handed me a brittle notebook filled with faded ink and forgotten names. The pages told of a ballroom once alive with laughter, now silent. A woman named Leia was mentioned, often her name etched in the margins like a ghost refusing to be forgotten. The caretaker said she was the last to dance there, and she never left. The deeper we dug, the more we found echoes of lives lived and lost. A ledger listed names of guests who never returned. Their final entries dated the night of the last ball. One entry read, "Leia, the last to leave, never came back." We found a hidden room beneath the ballroom, sealed with a rusted lock and a sign that read, "Do not disturb." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old perfume and something else, something that made my skin prickle. The caretaker said it was her room. In the end, the truth was never clear, but the room still waits, and the ballroom still hums with the ghosts of those who danced there. And somehow, I feel like they're still waiting for us to listen. You ever notice how some secrets just won't die? Like the one detail about the Ritz Paris that's been whispered in the dark for decades, but never confirmed. No one knows what exactly happened, only that it left a mark deeper than any blood could. It wasn't the murder, or the scandal, or even the disappearance that haunts the place. It was the one thing no one ever explained. You know, the thing that made the guests stop mid-sip and the staff start whispering in the back rooms. And here's the thing, the Ritz Paris still has that same quiet hum in the air, the same way it did in 1913 when the world first saw its glittering halls. But now, it's just the sound of footsteps in an empty room and the echo of a question that never gets answered. So next time you hear the story of the Ritz Paris, remember this: sometimes the most haunting part isn't the ghost, it's the mystery that lingers, waiting for someone to finally say, what really happened? You've heard the stories, but some locals say the Ritz Paris isn't just haunted, it's cursed. They whisper that the blood wasn't just from one night, but from years of secrets, betrayals, and love gone wrong. Some say the blood comes from a secret society that once met in those ballrooms, where whispered deals and forbidden love led to murder and madness. Others say it's the ghosts of the servants trapped in the walls, still waiting for their masters to return. The staff, they say, still tells stories in hushed tones about the night the lights went out and the music stopped. No one knows what happened, but the silence has never been the same since. And then there's the rumor no one dares to repeat it aloud, but the blood isn't just there to warn you. It's a message, a reminder that the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how deep you dig. You ever wonder what happens to a place that's been through so much? The Ritz Paris has seen love, war, and tragedy, but some things just don't fade away, no matter how many coats of paint you slap on the walls. There's a story about a young woman who vanished in the 1930s, her name lost to time. They say she was a star, a dancer, a muse, but the police found no trace of her, and the hotel never spoke of her again. They say her spirit still haunts the ballroom, wandering the same paths she once did, dancing to music only she can hear. But no one has ever seen her, and no one has ever found her. The hotel has tried to move on, to pretend the past didn't happen. But the Ritz Paris is full of secrets, and sometimes the past has a way of finding you. So if you ever find yourself in Paris, and you feel a pull toward the Ritz, maybe you should ask yourself, what are you really looking for? And what are you afraid to find? You ever notice how the past doesn't just linger, it whispers, it lingers, and sometimes it haunts the very stones it left behind? Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The Ritz Paris isn't just a place, it's a memory, a melody, a ghost in the wallpaper. You can almost hear it, can't you? But first, let's take a moment. Breathe. Let the silence settle. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that don't need a scream to be heard. And remember, dear listener, the best ghosts are the ones that stay with you long after the story's done. You've heard of the Pyrenees, but have you ever imagined a place where the stones themselves whisper secrets? Carcassonne isn't just a city, it's a living tapestry of time, where every cobblestone and crumbling wall holds a story, some of them still waiting to be told. This is a place where history doesn't just linger, it clings. The Cathars, the Crusaders, the French Revolution, they all left their mark, and some say they didn't leave in peace. The tombs, those dark, silent chambers beneath the city, are where the echoes of the past refuse to fade. There's something about the tombs of Carcassonne that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. Some say they're cursed, others claim they're just haunted by the souls of those who died there, whether by war, plague, or something far darker. But the most chilling thing isn't the ghost, it's the way the place feels like it's watching you. You can't help but wonder as you walk those narrow stone corridors if you're being followed or if you've been here before. And now, dear listener, as we step into the heart of Carcassonne's haunted past, I wonder, what secrets are you ready to uncover? What stories are waiting to be heard in the stillness of these ancient tombs? You know, the first time the people of Carcassonne really started talking about ghosts, it wasn't in the 19th century, it was in the 12th. Imagine, if you will, a medieval siege, knights in full armor, and a city holding its breath. The city was built on a hill, surrounded by a moat, and every wall was carved with stories of betrayal and blood. But the most famous tale is about a woman named Berthe, who was accused of witchcraft and buried alive. They said she screamed all night, her voice echoing through the stones. Some say the sound still lingers in the wind that sweeps through the narrow streets of Carcassonne today. But the real horror didn't end with her. The city had a long history of violence, wars, betrayals, and a dark secret buried in the earth that even the strongest minds couldn't escape. That's when the legends began. People claimed they heard whispers, felt cold spots, and saw shadows moving in the dark corners of the old city. And to this day, the spirits of Carcassonne still walk among us. You ever notice how the first signs of trouble are always the quietest? The kind of silence that makes you look up just once to see if the room is still there. It started with the stone, a few of them, cracked and cold, lying just outside the chapel. No one knew what they were, but they didn't belong, like they'd been placed there by someone who didn't care about the rules. Then the whispers, not the kind that come from people, but from the walls themselves. A murmur that followed you through the halls, like the castle was breathing and it didn't like what it saw. You ever wonder if the dead can remember the way home? Well, these stones didn't just sit there. They moved, just a little. At first, like the earth was trying to tell us something we weren't ready to hear. And then, of course, the light, not the kind that comes from above, but from below. A glow that seeped up through the cracks, like the castle itself was trying to show us where the darkness had been waiting all along. You know, the real horror here isn't the ghosts, but the silence. The kind that lingers after the last echo has faded, like a secret that refuses to be spoken. In 1822, a young woman named Marie disappeared without a trace. No body, no explanation, just a locked door and a shattered mirror in her room. Some say she was taken by the stones themselves, that the city's dark past lured her into its depths. Others say she vanished because she knew too much. Whatever the truth, what remains is the echo of a life cut short and the weight of a city that refuses to forget. I once spoke with a woman from Marseille who said she saw a woman in white standing by the ancient walls of Carcassonne. She said the woman looked exactly like the medieval queen who was buried there, and she didn't move, just watched. She said the woman's eyes were cold, like the stone beneath her feet, and when she tried to take a photo, the figure vanished into the fog, leaving only a faint trail of salt in the air. Another witness, a retired priest, said he heard a child's voice calling from the crypts at midnight. He said it wasn't a cry for help, but a whisper like someone was calling his name through the ages. He said the voice stopped when he turned the light on, but the sound of tiny footsteps echoed long after he left, as if the child were still walking through the stone corridors. And then there was the woman who claimed to see a ghostly procession during a storm. She said they were dressed in armor, carrying torches, and marching toward the cathedral as if they were still alive. She said the leader of the procession was a man in a red cloak, and when she tried to follow, the storm swallowed her whole, and she never returned to tell the tale. We started with the basics, you see, checking the records, the old maps, the crumbling ledgers. The town clerk had a laugh when I asked about the tombs. They're not haunted, he said, they're just old. But I knew better than to take that at face value. The first thing we found was a set of footprints in the dust near the entrance. They weren't made by anyone we could see. I knelt down, brushed the dirt, and saw the edges were too soft for boots. They looked like they'd been made by a child, but not a child who'd been here long. Then we found the diary. It was hidden behind a loose stone in the wall, wrapped in a tattered cloth. The handwriting was shaky, like the writer had been crying for weeks. It spoke of a girl named Isabel who had died in the tomb, and the walls had begun to whisper her name back. The final clue was the symbol carved into the stone near the entrance. It looked like a cross with a serpent coiled around it. We'd seen it before on the gravestones of people who had gone missing without a trace. It was a warning, or a mark, or maybe a calling card. We left it all there, untouched. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the tombs were watching, waiting for the next curious soul to step too close. You know, the thing that's bugged everyone for decades isn't the ghosts or the crypts, it's this one little detail that just doesn't add up. No one can agree on what happened to the body they found in the chapel. They pulled the body out of the floorboards, wrapped in a tattered sheet. But when they opened the bundle, there was nothing inside, just a cold, hollow space where a human should have been. Some say the body was never there in the first place. Others say it was never meant to be found. And then there are those who swear they saw a shadow move inside the chapel after the body was taken. It's like the chapel itself is keeping a secret, one that's been buried deeper than the bones of the town. And no one's ever dared to ask the right question. You've heard the tales, but what about the people who still whisper them? The old farmers who say the stones hum when the wind is just right, or the mothers who swear the ground remembers their children's laughter. Some say the tombs aren't just graves, they're prisons. That the spirits inside are trapped by something darker than death, something that refuses to let them rest. And then there are the children, you know, the ones who vanish in the night and are never found. Some said they were taken by the tomb, others said they were just lost in the maze of stone. But don't take it too seriously. After all, Carcassonne has more ghosts than a graveyard, and not all of them are willing to be tamed by stories. So, what do you think? Are these just stories, or are they echoes of something we've yet to understand? You ever wonder what happens when a tomb becomes more than just a grave? When it becomes a prison for the soul, and the walls start whispering secrets you can't unhear? There's a story that lingers here, a name that no one can quite say for sure. Some say it's a woman, others say it's a child, and no one has seen her since the 17th century. There are whispers of a hidden chamber beneath the church, a place where the bones of the past still lie, and where the past refuses to let go. And so, the mystery remains. A name, a story, and a silence that refuses to be broken. Are we the ones who will finally listen, or will we let it stay buried? You walked the cobbled streets, listened to the whispers of the stones, and felt the weight of history pressing down on your shoulders. What do you think lingers in those ancient walls, beyond the stories we've shared? Some say the past doesn't stay buried, just waiting for the right moment to rise again. What would you do if you knew the next tale might not be just a story? Remember, dear listeners, the greatest mysteries are not always solved, but they are always felt. And sometimes, that's enough. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. So, what will we uncover next? A lost love, a buried secret, or something far more terrifying than either? I'll see you on the other side of the veil. You've heard of castles with secrets, but what about a place where the silence speaks louder than any tale? The Priory of Sion, nestled in the misty hills of France, has long been whispered about in hushed tones. Some say it's a place where time itself has frozen, waiting for the right soul to listen. This isn't just another ruin, it's a place where legends refuse to fade. Stories of vanished monks, secret manuscripts, and voices that echo through the corridors at night have kept the townsfolk awake for generations. It's not the ghost that haunts them, but the silence that follows. The Priory of Sion has been a place of mystery for centuries, but the real intrigue begins with the question, why was it built? Some say it was a refuge for scholars, others claim it was a hideout for the Knights Templar, but no one can agree, and that's what makes it so eerily fascinating. Now imagine stepping inside, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and old parchment. Every shadow seems to move, every sound feels too close. It's not just the past that lingers here, it's the feeling that someone is still watching, waiting for you to find the truth. As you walk through the halls, you'll feel the weight of history pressing down on you. The walls seem to hold their breath, the air grows colder, and the echoes of the past grow louder. What secrets does the Priory of Sion still guard, and what will it demand of those who seek them? You know, the Priory of Sion wasn't just a place, it was a secret. A brotherhood of scholars and mystics, hiding in plain sight, protecting knowledge that could change the world. They started in the 12th century, in the heart of the Holy Land, but fled when the Crusades turned violent. Their mission? To safeguard ancient wisdom, especially that of the Cathars, who believed the world was a lie. But their greatest secret wasn't just knowledge, it was blood. They were protectors, yes, but also guardians of a lineage. A line of rulers, hidden in plain sight, their true identities concealed by a veil of myth and mystery. And then, the world changed. The French Revolution came, and with it, the collapse of their secrecy. Some fled, some were captured, and the Priory of Sion faded into legend, a whisper of what once was. But even now, in the silence of their abandoned halls, the echoes remain. Some say they never truly left, just waiting for the right time to return. You remember how the wind used to whisper through the trees, like it was trying to warn us. But now it's different, more like a sigh, like someone's holding their breath. The first time it happened, we thought it was just the cold. The stones beneath our feet were so damp, they felt like they were holding their own breath. Then the voices started, not loud, not clear, but a whisper, like someone was trying to say something just beyond our reach. We tried to laugh it off, like we always do when things get a little strange, but the laughter didn't sound like ours. It was too quiet, too careful. And then, one night, the silence stopped. The wind stopped, the whisper stopped, and for the first time, we realized we were no longer alone. You remember the silence that settled over the cloisters after the last bell had rung. It wasn't just quiet, it was alive, like the stones themselves were holding their breath. One evening, a novice girl named Isolde vanished without a sound. Her robes were found folded neatly by the chapel door, as if she had simply stepped out of the world. Days passed, and the chapel grew colder. The monks began to whisper that the walls were weeping, and that Isolde's voice could be heard in the echoes at dusk. One night, a monk dared to enter the cloister alone. He said he heard her voice calling from the east wing, but when he turned, the corridor was empty and the door was locked from the inside. To this day, no one knows what became of Isolde, but the chapel still echoes with her name, and the cloisters still hold her silence. Do you think she's still here, waiting for someone to listen? I met a woman once who said she saw the Priory's ghost at dusk, standing at the edge of the courtyard like a lost child, eyes full of unspoken sorrow. She told me the ghost didn't move, just watched, as if waiting for someone to finally come back and apologize for the centuries of silence. One man claimed he heard the ghost's voice in the night, a woman's whisper calling his name, echoing through the stone like a warning he didn't understand. He said the voice didn't sound angry, just lonely, as if it had waited for him all this time to finally hear someone. And then there was the farmer who swore he saw a figure in the fog, dressed in medieval garb, walking the path toward the priory, never stopping, never turning back. He never saw the face, just the back of the figure, and he said it looked like it was carrying something heavy, like a secret or a burden, neither of which could ever be left behind. We followed the trail of whispers to a crumbling stone archive, where dust motes danced in shafts of fading light. The air smelled of old paper and secrets waiting to be unearthed. Each page revealed more than just history. There were names, dates, and a pattern of disappearances tied to the priory's past. The silence was louder than the words. Inside the compartment, we found a journal, its pages filled with frantic handwriting, warnings, and a name that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. It was a name that shouldn't have been there. As we read, the weight of the past pressed on us. The journal spoke of a curse, a hidden truth, and a disappearance that had never been solved. It was as if the priory itself was trying to warn us. The deeper we went, the more we felt the presence of something unseen. The air grew colder, and the silence became a living thing, watching, waiting for us to leave. You see it now, don't you? That one thing, that one detail, that no one can explain. The stone that doesn't belong, the mark that never faded, the whisper that never ends. It's not just a stone, it's a question. A mark that should never have been made, a handprint that no one remembers pressing. They say the priory was built in a day, but this was added later by someone who knew too much. Some say it's a message, others say it's a signature, but no one knows who left it or why. And that's the real horror, isn't it? That something was left behind, and no one ever asked why. It's not just a mark, it's a story, a secret that no one wants to hear, but everyone feels in their bones. And until someone dares to ask the question, it will remain a whisper in the stone. You know, some folks say the Priory of Sion isn't just haunted by ghosts, it's haunted by secrets. They whisper that the stones themselves remember the blood that once stained them. Local legends claim that if you walk the path at dusk, you might hear the echo of a child's laughter only to find no one there. It's said the wind carries the voices of those who never left. There's even a theory that the priory is cursed by the very act of being hidden. The more people try to uncover its truth, the more it seems to vanish, like a dream slipping through your fingers. And then there's the rumor that the priory isn't just a place, it's a memory. A place where the past refuses to let go, and the living are just the ones who keep telling the stories. You know, sometimes the most haunting things are the ones we can't explain. The Priory of Sion still whispers its secrets, and no one's quite sure why it keeps them. The last official records from the site were sealed in 1948. Since then, every attempt to dig deeper has been met with silence or worse, strange disappearances. The locals call it the hollow echo, a sound not a voice, a presence, not a person. And if you're not careful, it might just find you. So here's the thing, if you ever feel the pull to go back, don't. Not unless you're ready to face what's been waiting for you all along. Because sometimes, the most terrifying things aren't the ghosts we see but the ones we feel. You've heard the whispers of the priory, felt the weight of its secrets. But what if the echoes aren't just from the past? What if they're still waiting for someone to listen, to remember? The silence here isn't empty, it's filled with something older, something that lingers beyond the reach of time. Sometimes, the most haunting stories are the ones we don't yet know. And as you turn to leave, the wind shifts. A single, low hum rises not from the trees, not from the earth, but from somewhere inside you. You might think you've left the priory behind, but sometimes, the past has a way of finding you, not in a scream, but in a whisper just loud enough to make you pause. So, when the next story begins, I hope you'll hear it not just with your ears, but with your heart. Because sometimes, the most chilling things are the ones that never leave. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. And remember, the stories we tell aren't just for the night. They're for the quiet moments, the lonely hours, and the strange, unexplained things that make you wonder if you're truly alone. Now, let's light another candle, and begin the next tale. You've heard of the Priory of Sion, haven't you? A place shrouded in whispers, a castle that's more legend than history. But let me tell you, it's not just the stones that hold the memory, it's the silence between them. Built in the 12th century, it was once a refuge for scholars, a place where secrets were guarded as fiercely as the walls. But something changed. The last records vanish, and the keepers of the place, well, they never returned. Now, the priory stands in eerie stillness, its halls echoing with the ghosts of those who once walked them. You can almost hear the rustle of parchment and the murmur of hushed conversations, but you're alone. And that's when you realize you're not really alone. The locals say the place is cursed, and it's haunted by the spirits of the scholars who vanished without a trace. Some say they were murdered, others that they were taken by the very secrets they sought to protect. And some say the secrets are still here, waiting for the right person to find them. So, when you step inside the Priory of Sion, remember, the silence is not empty. It's just waiting for you to listen. And sometimes, the shadows don't just lurk, they whisper. You know, the Priory of Sion wasn't always a place of secrets. It started as a humble monastery, tucked away in the French countryside, where monks and scholars gathered to study, pray, and protect the sacred text of the church. But something changed. A powerful noble family, the Montsegur, took an interest in the priory, and with them came whispers of hidden knowledge, ancient codes, and a growing sense of unease. The monks began to fear that their secrets were no longer safe. Rumors spread of a hidden room beneath the altar where the most sacred of texts were kept, and of a curse that had begun to take root. And so, in the quiet of the night, the monks made a terrible choice. They sealed the chamber, locked the door, and whispered a final prayer. But the price of silence was something no one could foresee. The priory faded from history, but the echoes of its secrets remained. Some say the curse still lingers, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. You remember the way the air felt in the priory, that thick, damp hush before the storm. It wasn't just the wind, it was something else, a presence, a whisper in the rafters. The first time it happened, I was just walking the grounds, trying to calm my nerves. Then out of nowhere, a low hum filled the air, like the sound of 1,000 bees trapped in a jar. We tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was just the old place settling, or the wind playing tricks. But then, the voices started soft, like a lullaby, but not from anyone we knew. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, but when I got up, there was no one there. Just the echo of a child's laughter, lingering like a memory that shouldn't be. The worst part, it didn't feel like a haunting. It felt like the place was waiting for someone, like it was holding its breath, hoping for a sign that we'd finally listen. You remember the whispers, don't you? The ones that came from the east wing, just after dusk. A child's voice calling for help, but no one answered. The caretaker found the door ajar, a trail of footprints leading into the darkness. No one had been there, yet the air felt wrong, like something had just left. One morning, they found the child's doll in the garden, left on the edge of the woods. It was never the same again. Not after that. The last time someone heard the cry was the night before the priory was sealed. No one ever found out what happened to the child, or why they never came back. And now, if you listen closely, you might still hear it. Just a whisper in the dark. But if you do, don't follow it. Not ever. I spoke with a woman who said she saw a figure in the priory's cloisters at midnight. She said it wasn't just a shadow, it had eyes, and it followed her as she ran down the stone steps. Another visitor claimed they heard a woman's laughter echoing through the halls, but when they turned, There was no one there, just the wind and the sound of something old breathing. The most chilling account came from a nun who once lived in the priory. She said the place was alive, and that the ghosts were not just memories, they were waiting. One woman, who visited alone, said she felt the weight of the place pressing on her chest. She told me, "I didn't come to see the ghosts, I came to see if they were still watching." And then there was the man who said he saw the ghost of a child, no older than 6, playing in the garden. He said it vanished when he tried to reach out, leaving only a single rose at his feet. These stories are not just about fear, they're about the weight of the past and the way some places hold on to what they've lost. You feel it, don't you? That something is still waiting. The investigation began with a simple request, a map of the priory's grounds and a list of its former residents. What they didn't expect was how many names would vanish before the first shovel hit the soil. We dug into the archives, and what we found was more than just history, it was a tapestry of secrets. A woman named Clara Wren, last seen in 1942, had no record of ever leaving the priory. Her husband claimed she vanished into the woods, but he was never the same after that. The more we uncovered, the more the priory seemed to guard its past. The local priest claimed he'd seen a figure in the chapel at midnight, but when asked to describe it, he simply said it looked like the priory itself was watching. One night, the team was asked to leave the priory early. The groundskeeper, a man with a quiet intensity, said the place had seen too much. He handed us a small, wooden box filled with old letters and a single photograph of a young woman, Clara Wren, smiling, standing in front of the priory's gate. We left with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear: the priory of Sion wasn't just haunted. It was remembering, and it was waiting for someone to listen. You know, the thing that haunts me most about this place isn't the ghosts or the whispers in the halls. It's the one detail that has never been explained. They say the last monk who lived here was found dead in his cell, but no one can say how. Some say he was poisoned. Others say he drowned in his own tears. The monks who came after him tried to move on, to forget. But the silence of that room, the weight of that locked door, it's like something still inside, waiting. And now, every time the wind howls through the priory's stone walls, I swear I hear the sound of a key turning, but there's no one there to find it. That's the one detail that has never been explained, and maybe it never will be. Some say the priory of Sion isn't just a ruin, it's a living thing. A place that watches, that waits, that whispers secrets to those who dare to listen. They tell stories of the monks who lived here, of their quiet devotion, and the strange things they saw in the night, shadows that moved without light, voices that spoke in tongues long forgotten. Some say the priory is a gateway, a place where the veil between worlds is thin, that the monks who lived here were not just men, but something more, keepers of knowledge, protectors of a truth too dangerous to share. And then there are the whispers. Some say the priory is still alive, still watching, that the stones remember, and the wind carries the voices of those who never left. So what do you think, dear listener? Is the priory a tomb, or a threshold, a place of silence, or a place that speaks in its own strange, ancient way? You know, sometimes the most haunting things aren't the ghosts we see, but the ones we never find. The priory of Sion, it's not just a place, it's a question that lingers like a whisper in the dark. The disappearances, so many of them, each one a thread in a tapestry we can't quite unravel. Some say the priory holds secrets, others say it's just a place where people vanish without a trace. So what do you think, dear listener? Is it the place itself, or the weight of the past that keeps those who enter from ever returning? Or perhaps the truth is just too dark to face? Maybe the real mystery isn't the missing people, but the silence that follows. A silence that lingers like a shadow in every corner of the priory and in every heart that dares to dream of the truth. And so, the story remains, not for the faint of heart, but for those who listen closely. For those who know that some secrets are meant to be kept and some shadows never to be lighted. You see that old road winding through the trees, and it feels like the past is still walking beside you. It's not just the wind in the branches, it's the silence, the way the light lingers just a moment too long. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Sometimes, the most haunted places are the ones you don't even know you're walking into. You think you're just passing through, but the earth remembers, and the air holds its breath. So, as you leave this road behind, remember, the past isn't just behind you, it's beside you, in the quiet, in the silence, in the spaces between the stories. And when you're ready, I'll be right here with another story, another shadow, another whisper waiting to be heard. You've heard of Salem, but have you ever wondered about Bideford? Nestled along the rugged coastline of Devon, this sleepy village once harbored a darkness that would shake its soul. In the 1600s, Bideford became the site of one of England's most brutal witch trials, a chapter of history that left scars deeper than any blade. They burned witches here, and the echoes of their screams still linger in the wind, carried by the waves that crash against the cliffs below. Today, Bideford is quiet, but the past is never far, and some say, if you listen closely, you can still hear the whispers of those who were never meant to be forgotten. You've heard the whispers of Bideford's past, but let's step back. It began in the 16th century, when the town was a quiet fishing village, its cobblestone streets humming with the rhythm of daily life. The air was thick with salt and secrets. The trouble started with a woman named Alina Flower. She was a midwife, a healer, a woman of quiet strength, but also a woman who dared to defy the strict rules of a male-dominated world. The trials began in earnest, with townsfolk testifying against her. Some were coerced, others were simply frightened. The accusations were vague, but the punishment was clear: death by hanging. Alina was not the only one. Others were dragged into the hysteria. Women who had healed, women who had spoken out, women who had dared to live beyond the bounds of what was expected. They were all cast as witches, and none were spared. And so, Bideford became a place of fear and memory. The witch trials left scars on the town, not just in the land, but in the hearts of its people. The legacy of these events lingers, hidden in the cobbled streets and the salt-laden air. You remember how the weather turned the day the rumors started. The sky was a bruised purple, and the air smelled like damp earth and something else, something bitter, like old regret. The first sign was the cows refusing to cross the bridge. They stood at the edge, lowing softly, as if they could feel the weight of something ancient pressing down from above. Children stopped playing by the old mill, claiming they heard laughter that wasn't theirs. It was high and keening, like a song being sung by ghosts who hadn't finished their ballads. And then there were the dreams of the town healer. She said the wind had changed, that the earth was no longer kind. She spoke of a shadow that walks with her, but never steps on the ground. It was all very quiet, very slow, but the silence was the loudest thing in the room, and the fear was the only thing that kept the people awake at night. You ever wonder what it feels like to be forgotten by the very people you tried to save? Imagine standing in the square, your voice raised, your hands trembling, as the crowd swells around you, not with fear, but with something colder, something like pity. The villagers don't cheer, they don't jeer. They just watch, like they're waiting for something to happen. And then, they turn their backs, as if the weight of your suffering is too much for them to bear. And then, one by one, they vanish. The healer, the midwife, the mother, they're not taken by force. They're just gone. Like the town has swallowed them whole, and no one remembers they were ever there. You can't scream. You can't run. All you can do is wait, and wait, and wait, until the town forgets you too. Until you become part of the silence, part of the story that's never told. I remember the way the candlelight flickered in the old trial room, casting long shadows on the faded courtroom walls. Some said the accused witches whispered to the flames, their voices rising like a cold wind through the cracks in the ceiling. One witness claimed to hear a child's laughter echoing through the halls at midnight, only to find the corridor empty save for a single blood-red ribbon tied to the doorframe, as if a ghost had been there. There were whispers of a curse, a silent punishment that followed the town for generations, children born with strange marks, dreams of fire and drowning, and a strange, lingering fear of the sea. Even now, some say you can hear their voices if you stand in the old jail cell, if you listen closely just before the door creaks open, and the air turns colder than it should. You ever wonder if some truths are better left buried, or if the past has a way of finding you, even when you're not looking? The investigation began with whispers of old letters and faded journals, tucked away in the dim corners of Bideford's archives. We followed the scent of history through brittle pages, each word a ghost trying to speak. We found names, dates, and accusations that didn't quite add up, some names repeated, others missing entirely. It felt like the trial had been written by someone who had never been there. The deeper we dug, the more we realized the trial wasn't just about a witch, it was about power, control, and the fear of the unknown. Some people in Bideford still remember the scent of burning herbs in the air that night. We found no bodies, no proof, only a silence that had lasted for centuries. But sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. You know, the one thing that has never been explained is the exact location of the witch's final hiding place. No one knows where she disappeared to after the trials. Some say she vanished into the woods, others insist she was taken by the town's own people. There are no records of her being buried, no grave to mark her passing. Just this strange, unmarked spot where the air feels heavier, and the wind seems to whisper her name. To this day, locals still tell stories of the witch's voice echoing in the trees, calling out for help. But no one dares to follow the path. not even the curious ones. And so, the last mystery of the Bideford witch remains: what happened to her, and why no one ever found the place where she disappeared. You've heard the stories, but have you ever stopped to wonder what the townsfolk of Bideford really think about the witch trials? Some say the old houses still whisper the names of those accused, and the sea remembers their fate. Some locals claim the village clock still ticks in time with the heartbeat of the accused, and if you listen closely, you can hear the echo of their final cries. It's a secret passed down through generations, like a family heirloom. There are even those who say the sea itself is haunted, that the tides carry the voices of the accused, calling out from the depths, never letting go. It's a story told by the fishermen in hushed tones as they cast their nets. So, what do you think? Are these just stories, or do they hold a truth that's been buried for centuries? Maybe the real magic isn't in the witch, but in the way the people remember her. You know, some mysteries just don't end. They linger, like a whisper in the dark. The Bideford witch trials, what happened to those poor souls? Did they truly vanish, or did they become something else entirely? Local legends say the land still remembers. The trees, the rivers, even the stones, they all seem to hold their breath when the wind shifts. It's as if the past hasn't quite let go. And what of the town itself? The people of Bideford, do they still feel the weight of that old injustice? Or have they learned to live with the ghost of a past they can't quite explain? So here's the thing: this story doesn't have an ending. It just keeps going, winding through time like a thread in an old tapestry. And maybe that's the real curse of Bideford, to never truly be done. You've heard the echoes of Bideford's past, but have you ever wondered what it's like to walk where the air feels heavy with forgotten sorrows? Maybe the stones remember more than we do. There's a kind of silence in places like this, not the kind you can fill with words, but the kind that hums with something older than time. What do you think it's whispering? And if you ever find yourself near the sea at dusk, listen closely. Sometimes the waves don't just crash, they sing. But don't worry, dear listener, the story isn't over. The next one is waiting, just beyond the next tide. You've heard of London's underground, but have you ever wondered what lies beneath Whitechapel Station? A place where time seems to freeze and whispers of the past refuse to fade. Once a bustling hub for the poor and the desperate, Whitechapel Station now feels like a tomb of forgotten dreams. The air here is thick with the weight of history. There have been sightings, shadows moving where there's no light, voices calling out in languages long forgotten, and always the same unspoken warning: don't go in. But for those who have ventured in, the truth is far more chilling. It's not just the cold or the darkness that lingers, it's the feeling that you're not alone. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. So, what is it about Whitechapel that holds such a grip on the imagination? Is it the ghosts or the stories we tell to keep the dark at bay? You know, the tunnels didn't start as a place of terror. Back in 1865, they were just a clever idea to link the city's growing railway network. Imagine, if you will, a bustling station full of steam and ambition, with workers rushing to build something that would change London forever. But here's the thing: this wasn't just any tunnel. It was built to connect Whitechapel Station to the East London Line, and it cut through the heart of a neighborhood that was already full of secrets. Rumor has it, some of the workers were hiding from the law, others were fleeing debt collectors, and a few, well, they just disappeared. As the tunnels expanded, so did the stories. Some said the workers were murdered and buried in the tunnels, others that they were taken by the city itself to be used as labor. But no one could prove it. And that's when the real fear began. By the time the tunnels were fully built, the station was a marvel of engineering, but the tunnels themselves became a mystery. Some say they were used for smuggling, others for hiding from the authorities, and a few say they were used for something far more sinister. And so, the tunnels remained hidden beneath the city, a place of both progress and peril. But as the years passed, one truth became clear: some places are built to connect people, and others are built to keep them apart. You remember the day you first noticed something was off. The air had a strange weight to it, like the station itself was holding its breath. It was just a whisper, but it felt like a warning. The clocks in the station were wrong. One was behind by minutes, another ahead, and the third just stopped. Time seemed to be playing tricks, like the place itself had forgotten how to move forward. The first real sign came when the lights went out. Not just a flicker, but a complete blackout. And when the lights came back, the walls had changed. They looked different, like the station had grown a new skin. You heard it too, that low, steady hum. It wasn't from the pipes or the machinery. It came from the walls themselves, like the station was breathing, but not in a way that felt quite right. It wasn't until the next morning that the truth started to take shape. People were waking up with strange dreams, and some couldn't remember their own names. The station had begun its work, and it was only just beginning. You ever heard of the woman who vanished in the tunnels, her footprints the only clue left behind? The police called it a case of mistaken identity, but the station staff say she was never the same after that night. They found her code in the lost and found, but no body, no wallet, just a single button from her dress missing, like she'd been pulled apart by something unseen. The last train left hours before she disappeared, and no one saw or heard anything. Just the echo of her footsteps fading into the silence of the tunnels. Some say she was never truly gone, just trapped between the world she knew and the darkness that called her name. Others say she was never there at all. But if you ever find yourself walking those tunnels after hours, you might hear her voice, calling your name just once before the silence returns. I've spoken to several people who claim to have seen the tunnels after hours. One man, a retired porter, said he saw a woman in a long black dress standing at the platform, just waiting for a train that never came. Another woman, who used to work at the station, said she heard whispers coming from the tunnels at night. She described them as voices calling out names, not in a language she recognized, but in a way that felt personal. And then there's the man who claims to have seen a shadow move when he was alone. He said it looked like a person, but it had no face. He said he tried to follow it, but the tunnel just ended. These aren't just stories. They're fragments of something real, something that lingers in the silence between the rails. What do you think they're waiting for? We followed the trail of old reports and faded maps, tracing the tunnels back to a forgotten time. The police had long since given up, but we found a name: Mr. Lyle, a man who vanished without a trace. The tunnels were sealed off decades ago, but we found a rusted door half buried in rubble. It creaked open like a tired old friend, revealing a narrow passage swallowed by shadows. We found the old ticket booth still standing, though time had taken its toll. The walls were covered in graffiti, some of it older than the station itself, like whispers from a bygone era. There were whispers of a man who was never seen again. A name, a face, and a trail that led to nothing. We didn't find him, but we found something else, something that still lingers. You know, there's one thing that's always bugged me about White the only thing they never seem to explain. You ever wonder what the real story is behind that missing tunnel? They say the tunnels were built to escape the city, but what if they were built for something else? Something more personal? You ever think about the people who disappeared there? Maybe the tunnels weren't just a way to get out. Maybe they were a way to get in, to someone, or something. You ever wonder if the disappearances had a pattern? And here's the kicker: no one ever found the body. No grave, no clue, just a silence that feels too heavy. You ever wonder if the tunnels are still waiting for someone to come back? That's the real mystery, isn't it? Not the ghosts, not the stories, but the silence. The unanswered question. You ever wonder what's out there, waiting for the right person to find it? Some say the tunnels were built to hide the bodies of the accused, others that they were used to smuggle contraband. But the real mystery is why the work stopped halfway through the project, the contractors vanished, and the tunnels were sealed off for decades. Now, locals say they hear whispers in the tunnels, like voices speaking in a language no one understands. Some claim the sound is the work of a ghostly choir. Others say it's the last words of the missing workers echoing through the stone. Some say the tunnels are a gateway to another world, where the dead still walk and the living are just visitors. Others believe the spirits are waiting for someone to finally uncover the truth, no matter the cost. And still, every now and then, someone dares to go in, not for the thrill, but to find closure. But what they find is never what they expected, and sometimes, it's not even real. You know, some mysteries don't just fade away, they linger, like a whisper in the dark. White Station's tunnels have never given up their secrets, and neither has the truth about what happened there. Every year, new stories surface, new theories, but no one ever seems to solve it. Was it a lost child, a murdered woman, or something far more unsettling? And so, the tunnels remain, not just a place, but a symbol of something deeper, a mystery that refuses to let go, even after all these years. Perhaps the real curse isn't the ghosts, but the truth itself, that some stories are meant to remain forever unresolved. You've heard the whispers of White felt the chill of its forgotten corridors, but did you ever wonder what lingers in the silence between the stories? Some say the ghosts are just the echoes of those who once lived, loved, and lost, trapped between the tracks and the time they left. The past is never truly gone, it just waits, patient and quiet, for the right moment to make itself known. And when the lights go out, and the echoes grow louder, you might just find yourself wondering if you're still in the station or in the story. But for now, let the stories rest. Tomorrow, we'll light another candle and tell another tale. You ever wonder what happens to the souls of those who walk through the halls of justice and never walk out again? The halls of justice, now a crumbling relic in the heart of a forgotten city, whispers secrets that no one dares to hear. Once a grand courthouse, it was built in the 1800s with marble columns and vaulted ceilings, but now it's a place of shadows and silence, where the echoes of the past refuse to fade. The halls of justice are no longer a place of law, but of legend. And if you dare to step inside, you might find yourself walking a path that leads nowhere and never back. So, what do you think happens to those who enter the halls of justice and never leave? Are they trapped in time, or do they walk among us, unseen, waiting for someone to finally listen? You know, the halls of justice didn't start as a place of horror, but as a promise of justice. Back in the 1800s, they built it with stone and hope, a place where the guilty would be found and the innocent protected. It was meant to be a symbol, a place where the law could be served with dignity. But even then, the whispers of the past crept in of the ones who never left and the ones who were never heard. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Then came the lawyers, the judges, the juries, some with secrets, some with guilt. And in the stillness of the halls, the truth began to unravel, not in court, but in the cold, unspoken spaces between. The halls of justice was built to serve justice, but it became a place where justice was served in silence. And in that silence, the echoes grew louder, and the truth began to haunt. You remember the first time you noticed the chill, how the air seemed to hold its breath just before the lights flickered in the hallway. It was like the house itself was waiting for something. The clock on the wall stopped at 3:17, and the silence that followed was louder than any sound. You glanced at the others, but no one spoke. We all knew we were being watched. Then came the smell, a faint, metallic tang that made your skin prickle, like the memory of a long-dead courtroom where justice had gone terribly wrong. And then the door creaked open on its own, just a crack, and for a moment, you could see something in there, a silhouette, just long enough to make your heart race. You know, sometimes the worst crimes aren't committed with a weapon, but with silence. The year was 1951, and in the quiet town of Laramie, a young woman named Eleanor Whitmore vanished without a sound. Her last known location was the old county jail, a place they said had a way of keeping its own. The doors were locked from the inside, and the key was found in her pocket, untouched and cold. The town never found her, but they found her journal. It was tucked inside a hollowed-out Bible, hidden beneath the floorboards of her bedroom. Every page was written in her own hand, and every word was a question. In her final entry, she wrote of hearing a child's laughter at night and a door that opened by itself. She said the walls whispered to her, and the walls had always known her name. They never found the child. They never found the door. And to this day, the jail still sits empty, its halls echoing with the silence of mystery that refuses to be solved. I remember the night clearly, the kind of night when the air feels heavy and the wind whispers through the trees like it's trying to tell you something. The courthouse was quiet, but not peaceful. One of the clerks, a young woman named Clara, swore she saw a shadow move behind the judge's chair just before the verdict was read. She said it looked like a man in a black suit, but the man wasn't there. Another witness, a retired lawyer, claimed he heard a voice in the jury room during the trial. It was the voice of a man who had been executed years before, and he said it was asking for justice. These aren't just stories, they're the echoes of the past, lingering in the very stones of this place. And sometimes, they're not so easy to ignore. We started with the old records, you know, those brittle, yellowed pages tucked away in the basement of the courthouse. The first thing we found was a name, Martha Lanning, a woman who vanished in 1948, just before the building was sealed off for renovations. Then came the diary, written in a shaky hand, filled with strange entries about cold hands on the doorframe and whispers in the elevator. It was written by a janitor who worked there until the day he disappeared without a trace. The most unsettling find was the security footage, grainy, black and white, showing a figure in the hallway late at night, always moving in the same direction, never stopping. And when we tried to play it back, the figure would vanish. Finally, we found a letter from a former judge, sealed with a wax stamp that had long since melted. It spoke of a secret room, hidden behind the judge's chambers, where the most damning evidence was kept and where some people never left. You know, the thing that has never been explained is the one detail that keeps creeping back into every account like a whisper from the dark. It's not the cold, not the sound, not even the shadows. It's the silence that seems to swallow everything. They say it's the silence of the empty chair, the chair where the judge used to sit. But that chair was never moved. And yet, when they look, it's always gone, like the room itself is playing tricks on them. Some say it's the judge's voice, the voice that once echoed through the halls, now just a lingering echo in the silence. Others say it's the judge's absence, a void that the room can't shake, no matter how many times they try to fill it. And still, no one has ever found the judge's body. Not in the courtroom, not in the archives, not even in the cemetery. Just the silence, and the chair, and the whisper that never stops. You've heard the stories, but some say the real ghosts are the ones who never left. The ones who sat in those old chairs, whispering theories into the silence of the halls. Some believe the walls remember the voices of those who fought for justice, lawyers, judges, even the accused. They say the echoes are still here, trapped between the cracks of time. There's talk of a secret tunnel beneath the courthouse, built by the first justices to escape a fire that killed more than just the building, it killed the truth. And then there's the rumor that the judge who presided over the last trial still walks the halls, searching for the one who betrayed him, his own son, who vanished without a trace. Theories swirl like the cold air that lingers in these halls. Some say the ghosts are just waiting for someone to listen. Others say they're waiting for the truth to finally be told. You know, some mysteries don't just fade away, they linger, like a ghost in the halls of justice. They whisper through the cracks, waiting for someone to listen. The case was never solved, but the story? It's been told and retold like a lullaby that never ends. You ever wonder what it's like to be trapped in a mystery that never resolves? You think you've seen the last of it? No, you just heard the first whisper. The halls of justice don't close for the living. They wait for the ones who dare to listen. So next time you walk past the courthouse, remember, some doors don't just open. They wait for you to find the key. You've heard the whispers of the halls of justice now, but what if the walls are still listening? What if they remember more than we ever will? Sometimes, the most haunted places are the ones that seem the least haunted, until you notice the silence is too heavy. So, as we turn the page, remember, some stories don't end. They just wait in the quiet places for someone to listen. And now, dear listener, let's see what lies beyond the next turn of the page and the next chapter of the unknown. You've heard of haunted churches, but have you ever heard of a choir that vanished without a trace? Well, Lithburg Church in Suffolk, England, stands quiet and ancient, its stone walls whispering secrets of a long-ago mystery. Once, this place echoed with the voices of a choir, their hymns filling the air like a prayer. Now, only the wind and the creak of old wood remain. No choir, no explanation, just silence. Local legends say the choir disappeared one stormy night, their voices swallowed by the wind. Some say they were taken by the ghosts of the past, others claim they were never there at all. But the real mystery is this: who were these singers, and why did they vanish? Every visitor to Blithburg feels the weight of their absence, like a song that never finished. As you walk through Blithburg, you can almost hear them just out of reach, like a melody fading into the dark. What would you do if you were the last to hear their voices? You know, the Blithburg Church Choir didn't just vanish, it was a place of music, community, and faith. Every Sunday, they'd gather in that ancient stone church, their voices rising like a hymn to the heavens. The choir was made up of local folks, some elderly, some young, each with their own story, their own reason to sing. They've been meeting for decades, passing the baton from one generation to the next. And then, one day in 1943, the choir just disappeared. No one saw them leave. No one heard from them. The church was silent, the music stopped, and the world moved on except for the ghosts who stayed behind. You might wonder, how could a group of ordinary people vanish so completely? Was it a secret mission? A cover-up? Or was something more otherworldly at play? That's the mystery of Blithburg. What happened to those voices? And why did they still echo through the stone, waiting for someone to listen? You remember the first time you heard the choir practice, the way their voices rose like a lullaby in the morning mist. But then, the notes started to fade, like someone had turned down the volume on a radio. One day, the music stopped mid-verse. The conductor looked around, wide-eyed, as if he just realized the voices had gone silent. The silence was louder than the music ever was. They started to notice things: footsteps in the aisles when no one was there, whispers in the pews, and the scent of old incense that hadn't been burned in decades. It was as if the church itself was remembering. The youngest member of the choir, a girl of 12, began to speak in riddles. She said the voices were still there, just not singing anymore. She said they were waiting for something to happen. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. And then, one morning, the voices were gone. The church was empty, the pews still, the air thick with the weight of what had been left unsaid. You remember the moment, don't you? The silence that fell like a curtain over the church. No voices, no footsteps, just the weight of something unseen pressing against the air. The conductor stood frozen, his baton midair, the music never ending. The choir had vanished, and the hymns were still echoing through the rafters as if the ghosts had never left. They were never found, just their robes still neatly folded, lying on the floor like a cruel joke. The church was left in silence, and the hymns, they say, still play at midnight. Some say the ghosts still sing, trapped in their own melody. Others believe the choir was taken by something that feeds on voices, and the church is its eternal stage. And you, dear listener, have heard the song. Now you must decide, was it a ghost or a warning? I spoke with an elderly woman from Blithburg who said she heard the choir singing in the early hours, but when she went to check, the church was empty and the voices had vanished like mist. Another local claimed to see a group of shadowy figures standing at the back of the nave, their faces obscured, as if they were waiting for something or someone. Some say the choir members were never meant to leave the church, that they were bound to it by an ancient pact, their souls lingering in the echo of their song. One last witness, a young boy who once lived nearby, swore he saw the choir members walking through the cemetery, their heads bowed, as if in mourning. These stories may be legend, but they remind us that some places hold memories too strong to fade, and some voices too quiet to be heard. We started by combing through the church records, and what we found was more than a little strange. The choir members vanished one by one, each leaving behind a note, almost like they were saying goodbye in their own way. The notes were all written in the same hand, but the messages were different. Some were heartbroken, others were cryptic, and a few simply said, "I can't go on." It was like they were trying to explain something, but not quite getting through. Then there was the music. The choir had a particular piece they always sang on the first Sunday of the month, something about a lullaby or a lament. We found no record of that piece ever being performed, not even in the church's archives. We even asked the current priest, who insisted the choir had never performed that piece. But when we played it on a small organ in the back of the church, the air seemed to hold its breath and the lights flickered as if something had just passed through. The most unsettling thing? The last note from the last missing choir member was found in the choir loft, still folded in the same way as if it had been left there minutes before. No one had touched it, and no one knew who wrote it. You know, the one thing that's never been explained is the missing hymn book. It vanished the night the choir disappeared, and no one knows where it went or why it was so important. It was found years later, tucked beneath a loose floorboard in the choir loft, but the pages were blank, as if the words had been erased by something unseen. Some say the book was never meant to be found, that it was a message, a warning, or a trap, but no one knows who left it there or why they thought it would matter. And to this day, the hymn book sits in the church's archives untouched, waiting, like the choir, like the past, like the silence that never fades. You've heard the stories, but let me tell you what the locals still whisper: there's a reason the choir never returns for the holidays. Some say they're trapped in the church, singing for the souls they couldn't save. Others believe the choir vanished during a storm, their voices swallowed by the wind. But the wind never tells the same story twice. And the villagers? They've never been able to agree on what happened. You can visit the church, but don't be surprised if the wind carries a whisper or two. Some say you can hear them if you listen closely just before the storm returns. And if you're ever in the area, don't let the silence fool you. The choir may be gone, but the church still sings. Just don't ask it to sing in the dark. So here we are, still chasing echoes of that long ago Sunday, with no answers and plenty of questions. It's like the church itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to finally listen. The choir boys are gone, but the silence they left behind is louder than any hymn. You can almost hear the hush of their final moment, just before the world went quiet. Every year, on the anniversary, the townsfolk gather, but the mystery stays. It's like the church is a living thing, remembering, waiting for someone to finally uncover the truth. And so the story lingers, not in a book, but in the air, in the silence, in the way the wind still seems to whisper their names just before it fades away. You know, sometimes the most unsettling silence is the one that follows a story, like the hush after a storm, when the world seems to hold its breath. And sometimes, the ghosts don't leave a trace, just a lingering question, a whisper in the wind, a song that never ends. So, as we wrap up this tale, I leave you with this: what if the choir never left? What if they're still here, singing in the dark, waiting for someone to listen? Until next time, dear listeners, keep your doors open and your hearts open. The night is long and the stories are waiting. You ever feel like some places hold their secrets tighter than others? Bideford, in North Devon, is one of those places. A town where the wind whispers old names and the sea keeps its own counsel. It's a place where the past doesn't stay buried. You can almost hear the echoes of the 16th century, when fear turned into fire and the accused became the accusers. Now, the town itself is quiet, but the history is anything but. Bideford is known for its witch trials, but it's not the usual story you hear. This was a place where the accused were not just women, they were women of status, of influence, of power. And yet, there's a strange kind of reverence here. People talk about it in hushed tones, as if the town itself is holding its breath, waiting for the truth to be told. So, what happened here? And why did the locals still whisper about the Bideford witch trials? Come with me, and let's step into the shadow of history. You know, the Bideford witch trials didn't start with a scream or a ghostly figure. It began with a woman named Alice Pickcraft, who was accused of heresy and witchcraft in the 1640s. She was a midwife, a healer, a woman of the cloth, and that made her dangerous. The accusations came from a young girl named Joan, who claimed Alice had cursed her and made her sick. The girl's father, a local preacher, took the claim seriously, and so the court was called, a place where truth and fear often walked hand in hand. Though Alice was eventually acquitted, she was never allowed to return to her home. She was banished, her name erased, her legacy a whisper in the wind. And yet, the fear she inspired never left the town. It became a part of its soul. The Bideford witch trials were more than just a story of one woman. They were a mirror to the fears of a society that saw women as dangerous, unnatural, and unpredictable, and that fear, my dear listeners, is where the real horror begins. You know, sometimes the first sign that something is wrong isn't a scream or a shadow, it's a silence. One morning, the village bell didn't ring. No one noticed at first, but the air felt different, like the world had held its breath. Then came the whispers, not the kind you hear in the dark, but the kind that cling to your skin like a chill. People started saying the wind carried voices, not from the trees, but from the earth itself. The first woman to vanish was found days later, her belongings untouched, as if she'd simply stepped away. But the villagers knew better. She'd been taken, not by man, but by the land itself. And then the children began to speak of a figure in the woods. Not a man, not a woman, but something older. Something that had watched the village for centuries, waiting for the right moment to awaken. You see, the land never forgets. And neither does the witch who once called it home. The first signs were subtle, but they were there. And they were only the beginning. You remember the girl who vanished in the night, her name lost to the tides of time. No one saw her leave, but her mother heard the echo of her laughter in the woods. The last time anyone saw her, she was running through the forest, her bare feet silent on the mossy ground, her dress fluttering like a ghost in the wind. Her mother searched for days, calling her name until her voice cracked, until the forest swallowed her cries and left only silence in its wake. And so, the town turned its gaze from the girl to the witch, blaming her for the child's disappearance even though no one had seen her face. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something to enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dot smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The girl was never found, but her mother's grief became the first spark in the fire that would consume Bideford for years. You've heard the rumors, but let me tell you what the villagers actually saw. One farmer claimed he saw a woman with a lantern, walking through the fog, her face hidden behind a veil of ivy. Another said she was seen in the woods, dancing with a crowd of villagers, her laughter echoing like the wind through the trees. It was said she had eyes like burning embers. One of the most unsettling accounts came from a priest who swore he saw her in the mirror of his chapel, her face reflected in the glass, but her mouth moving as if she were speaking. And then there's the final, chilling testimony of a man who claimed to see her in the last days of the trials, standing at the edge of the town, watching the flames consume the last of the accused. These were not just stories. They were the echoes of fear, the whispers of a town on the edge of madness. What did they really see? And what did they truly believe? We followed the trail of old ledgers and whispered warnings. The records were brittle, the ink faded, but the names remained like ghosts clinging to the edges of time. In one entry, a name kept appearing: Marjorie, the accused. She was said to have cursed the town, and no one could explain how she vanished without a trace. The townsfolk spoke of her as a witch, but some said she was just a woman who had been wronged. We found no proof of her guilt, only the lingering fear that she had been silenced. Then there was the letter. It was found in a sealed box, hidden beneath the floorboards of the old jail. It was written in an old hand, and it spoke of a final plea. The letter said, "They took me, but I will not be forgotten. My name is not a curse, it is a truth they fear." We didn't know who wrote it, but it felt like a whisper from the past, reaching out to us. You know, there's one thing that's always left us scratching our heads. Why did the accused witches never speak? No one ever heard them deny their charges. No one ever heard them plead their case. Just silence. Some say they were too afraid. Others say they were already lost to the madness of the time. But what if they were silenced not by fear, but by something else entirely? The records say nothing, but sometimes the quietest voices are the loudest. And sometimes, the truth is hidden in the silence between the words. So we'll keep asking, just like the ones who came before us. What did they know? And why did they never speak? You've heard the names, but have you ever asked why the Bideford witches were never tried in a court? Some say the town was too small, others claim the church had its own secrets. What do you think really happened? Local legends say the girls who were accused had been seen whispering to the sea, or dancing in the moonlight. Some say they were just trying to survive, others say they were witches, but no one ever really knew for sure. One theory says the real crime was never witchcraft at all, but something far more personal. Some say the girls were accused to silence a family feud, or to cover up a secret that had been buried for decades. And then there's the rumor that the town itself is cursed, that the sea never lets go of the past, and the wind carries whispers of those who were wronged. Have you ever heard the sea moan at night? Some say the real witches never left Bideford, that they still walk these streets, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. But would you dare ask them what they've been waiting for? The truth may never be found, but the stories live on. And maybe, just maybe, they're the only thing keeping the past from being forgotten. You know, sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones we can't quite solve. The Bideford witch trials left behind more questions than answers, and some of those questions still echo through the fog-laden streets of this quiet coastal town. The records are incomplete, the testimonies are contradictory, and the truth seems to have vanished like the last light of dusk over the sea. Was it a genuine hunt for evil, or a cover for something far more sinister? Even now, locals whisper of the old courthouse where the trials took place, and some claim to hear the sound of a woman's voice calling from the shadows, echoing the words of the accused. Perhaps the real horror isn't the witch, but the people who stood in judgment. And maybe the truth is still waiting to be uncovered, hidden in the silence between the lines of history. You know, sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones we don't finish. What if the Bideford witches never truly vanished? What if they're still watching, still waiting, for the next poor soul to stumble into their web of fear and folklore? I wonder if the ghosts of those accused still haunt the streets, whispering to the lost and the lonely. Maybe they're not so much vengeful as they are forgotten. And in the quietest moments, that's the scariest thing of all. And if you ever find yourself in Bideford, I'd suggest you keep your head low and your eyes wide. You never know who might be listening and who might have been wronged. But don't worry, dear listener, we've got more stories to share. Just remember, the past doesn't stay buried. It just waits for the right moment to rise. Until next time, stay warm, stay curious, and don't forget to check your attic. You've heard of the Spanish Main, haven't you? A place where gold and greed forged legends and the sea swallowed more than just treasure. But there is a name whispered in the dark, La Isla de los Muertos, the island of the dead, a place where the sea doesn't just claim the lost, it keeps them. The locals speak of voices in the surf, of eyes watching from the deep, of a curse tied to the blood of the first Spanish settlers who dared to claim this land. And now, decades after the last ship left, the island is empty. But the sea still remembers, and it's not done with its stories yet. You see, it began in the 16th century when the Spanish came looking for gold and glory. They sailed across the Atlantic, chasing the promise of riches in the New World. But what they found were treacherous waters, storms, and the unrelenting sea. The ships were called galleons, massive, lumbering things with towering masts and sails like the wings of great birds. They carried soldiers, treasure, and sometimes the innocent. But the sea had a way of swallowing them whole. Many of these voyages were doomed from the start. Some ships were lost to storms, others to pirates, and some to the very sea they sought to conquer. The survivors told stories of the drowned, of those who vanished without a sound. But the most haunting tales were of the ones who never made it ashore. The drowned were said to linger, their voices carried on the wind, their spirits bound to the waves they could never escape. And so, the legend grew. The drowned of the Spanish Main became more than just lost souls, they became warnings, echoes, and the ghosts of a time when the sea claimed more than just ships. You know how sometimes the first clue is just a whisper, like the wind shifting in a way that feels wrong? Well, that's exactly what happened here. The sailors noticed the air had a strange weight to it, like the sea itself was holding its breath. Then came the silence. Not the kind of silence that comes after a storm, but the kind that feels like the world has paused to listen. The crew started whispering about the black tide, a legend they'd heard in ports far and wide. Then the compasses began to spin wildly. The maps, the charts, the stars, they all led to the same place, but no one could say where it was. It was as if the sea itself was trying to tell them something, but in a language they couldn't understand. The last thing anyone expected was the sound. A low, mournful moan that came from the water, like a voice calling from the grave, and when the men listened closely, they could swear it was singing in a language they'd never heard before. You've heard the stories of the cursed ships and the haunted coasts, but what about the ones who vanished without a trace? The ones who were never seen again, not even in the water. It was 1698. And the Spanish galleon San Juan de Ulua set sail with treasure and a crew of over 300. They were bound for Havana, but something changed the course of their fate. Some say the ship was taken by a ghostly force, others believe it was cursed by the gold it carried. But no one knows what happened to the crew, whether they were swallowed by the sea or carried away by the wind. To this day, sailors tell of hearing the ship's bell ring in the night, and of seeing a shadowy figure on the water never quite reaching the shore, never quite disappearing. I've read accounts from old sailors who swear the sea doesn't just take lives, it takes memories too. One man said he saw a woman in a white dress dancing on the waves, her arms outstretched like she was calling someone home. Another claimed he heard her voice in the storm, a lullaby in Spanish, echoing through the hull. He said it was a warning, but he didn't listen. He didn't listen until it was too late. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. There's a story about a ship that vanished in 1823, carrying a crew of 30. No bodies were ever found, but the captain's log, written in his own hand, was recovered years later. He wrote of a curse, a woman in the water, and a price paid in silence. And then there are the children. Some say the sea doesn't just take the young, it keeps them trapped in the cold, waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. These stories aren't just about fear, they're about love, loss, and the weight of memory. And sometimes, the sea remembers better than we do. We followed the trail of old maps and whispered warnings, the air heavy with the scent of salt and rot. The locals wouldn't say much, but their eyes told stories of things best left buried. At the edge of the village, we found the remains of a shipwreck, half buried in the sand, its ribs of wood gnawed by time and tide. It was as if the sea had swallowed the ship whole and left only its bones. In the journal, we found names, some familiar, some forgotten, and a final entry, written in a trembling hand: the sea does not forget, it only waits for the right moment to take its due. We left with the weight of history on our shoulders and the feeling that we had only scratched the surface of something far older, far darker, and still very much alive. You know, sometimes the most haunting thing about a story isn't the tragedy, but the mystery. The one thing that just doesn't add up. That one detail, you see, has never been explained. No records, no testimonies, no one ever saw the ship that vanished with them. It's like the sea itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to ask the wrong question. So, what do you think? Was it a curse? A trick of the tides? Or something far more personal? Whatever it was, it never left the water, and it never left the hearts of those who still remember. You've heard the tales of the drowned, but what if the sea itself remembers them? Some say the waves whisper their names at dusk, and the tide carries their sorrow. Local fishermen swear they've seen shapes in the surf, not of men, but of women wearing faded dresses, their hair floating like ghostly tendrils in the water. Some believe the drowned are not truly gone, but trapped between worlds, their souls bound to the sea until they're remembered again. And so, the legends live on not in blood or bones, but in the stories passed from mother to daughter, whispered at the edge of the hearth, as the sea remembers. You see, the mystery isn't just in the shipwrecks or the lost souls, it's in the silence that lingers, the questions that never get answered. Who was really on that last voyage? And why did no one ever come looking for them? The records are missing, the crew names are incomplete, and the only thing that remains is the whisper of the waves and the echo of a forgotten truth. We've searched, but the sea has swallowed the answers. There are theories, of course, pirates, mutiny, storms, but nothing holds up under scrutiny. And the more we look, the more we realize we're chasing ghosts, not answers. So we sit here, in the quiet, with the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. The sea doesn't care about our questions. It just keeps swallowing the past, one story at a time. You've heard the stories of the drowned, but have you ever wondered what it's like to be the last one to see them vanish? What if the sea isn't just taking lives, but remembering them? The water doesn't just take them, sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it waits. For you, for me, for the ones who still walk these shores. The sea doesn't forget, it just takes its time, and sometimes it asks if you're ready to listen. So, shall we go deeper, into the silence that lingers after the last wave has passed? Remember, my dear, the stories aren't just about the drowned, they're about the ones who never stop searching. Now, let's turn the page, and let the sea speak. You've heard the whispers of the Bell Witch, but have you ever stood in the shadow of her haunted home? This isn't just a house, it's a place where time seems to fold in on itself, and the air smells like old secrets and candle wax. The Bell Witch's legacy isn't just in the stories, it's in the land itself. The trees here seem to lean in, as if listening, and the silence between the creaks of the old wooden floorboards is louder than any sound. The stories say the house was built in the early 1800s, but you can feel the weight of centuries in the air. Every step you take echoes like it's being carried by ghosts, and every shadow feels like it's watching. It's not just the history that lingers here, it's the memory of a woman who was once a child, and a family who was broken by a curse that no one could explain. You can feel it in the silence, in the dust, in the air that smells like old fear and old hope. You remember the story of the Bell Witch, right? It started in the 1800s in the quiet hills of Robertson County, Tennessee. A family, the Bells, lived in a modest home, but their lives were about to turn upside down. The family was known for their kindness, but the youngest daughter, Rachel, began having strange fits. She would cry out, speak in tongues, and even claim to see a shadowy figure lurking in the corners of her room. Then came the mysterious figure known only as the witch. He would appear in the night, speak in a guttural voice, and terrify the family. No one knew who he was, and no one dared to confront him. The story took a tragic turn when Rachel's mother, Sarah, was found dead in the woods, her body showing signs of struggle. The family was shattered, and the legend of the Bell Witch began to spread far and wide. To this day, the Bell Witch story remains one of the most haunting and mysterious legends in American folklore. Some say the spirit still lingers, waiting for the next family to fall into its trap. You remember how things started, don't you? The first time you felt the air shift, the way the shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far. It was like the house itself had a breath, and it wasn't yours. The clocks would stop, not just once, but every day at exactly 3:00. You'd check them, sure, but they'd always be right, like someone was watching, waiting for the moment to strike. Then the dreams, the same ones over and over. The black water, the red eyes, the sound of a child laughing from the dark. You'd wake up with a chill, but no one else could hear it. It wasn't just the house, you know. It was the land itself. The trees would whisper when the wind passed through them, and the ground would tremble underfoot, like it was remembering something it shouldn't. And then the voices started to change. Not just the whispers, not just the dreams. They began to speak in real time, like the house was learning to talk, and it wasn't going to stop until it said everything. You remember the night the house shook, and the voices in the walls grew louder than the storm. The old man in the attic was gone, and the air smelled like burnt hair and something sweet and wrong. The family gathered in the parlor, whispering, but no one dared to speak of the man who'd vanished. The clock stopped at midnight, and the floorboards creaked like they were alive. Neighbors claimed they saw a figure in the woods, dressed in the man's clothes, but they never said what it did. Only that the silence after the storm was louder than the storm itself. The last thing anyone heard was the sound of a door slamming shut, not from inside the house, but from the woods, as if the man had been dragged back by something that hadn't been there before. And to this day, the house still stands, though it's never been the same. Some say the man's ghost is still there, waiting for someone to hear the voices again. You remember the whispers in the dark, don't you? The way the walls seemed to breathe, and every shadow had a story waiting to be told. The neighbors, they swore they heard it too. A voice, low and cruel, calling out from the depths of the house, like it was alive and waiting for someone to answer. And then there was the child, who claimed to see her in the mirror, watching, never blinking, until the glass cracked and the reflection vanished into the wall. These weren't just stories. These were warnings, echoes of a curse that refused to die, still lingering in the bones of that old house, waiting for someone to listen. We dug into the records, you see, and what we found was a tangle of letters, court transcripts, and old newspaper clippings. It was like piecing together a ghost's diary, every line a whisper from the past. One letter, written by the lawyer defending the family, spoke of a madwoman in the woods, and another mentioned a child who spoke in riddles. They didn't know what they were looking at, but they knew something was wrong. The more we read, the more the pieces began to fit. It wasn't just a ghost, it was a warning, a message left in the silence between the lines of history. And yet, for all we uncovered, the truth remained just out of reach, like the shadow of a child who never grew up and still walks the woods at night. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. We were left with more questions than answers, but that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Sometimes the most haunted places are the ones that whisper the loudest and never let you go. You know, there's one thing about the Bell Witch that has always bugged me. It's not the screaming, not the possession, not even the whole cursed family thing. It's this one little detail that no one ever talks about. It's the way the spirit always spoke through the medium, but never through the family, like it was waiting for someone else to come along, someone who would understand its message, not just fear it. You ever think about what it's like to be the one who hears the voices, to know the truth, but be too afraid to say it out loud? Maybe the Bell Witch wasn't just a curse, it was a warning. And you know what? I think that's the real mystery. Not who the Bell Witch was, not why they came, but what happened to the person who finally figured it out. Because no one ever talks about that either. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what the locals really think? In the quiet of the hills, they still whisper that the Bell Witch's curse isn't just in the past, it's in the blood. Some say the family curse is a warning about pride, power, and the price of being too loud in a world that's always been too quiet. And then there are those who think the real curse is the one we carry, not of the witch, but of the stories we tell ourselves about the past. So, as you walk these hills, remember this: the Bell Witch's legacy isn't just in the bones of the land, it's in the hearts of those who still listen, and still fear, and still wonder. You've heard the tales, but what if the real story is still buried beneath the soil of this old hill? What if the witch never left, and the family never fully exorcised her? The last letters, the final warnings, they all point to one thing: the curse didn't end. It evolved, and now, it's waiting for someone to wake it up again. And what about the house itself? Still standing, still waiting. What secrets does it hold for the next soul who dares to step inside? So, what will you do? Will you let the past stay buried, or will you step into the dark and find out what really happened to the Bell Witch? You know, sometimes the most haunting stories are the ones that never quite end. They linger in the corners of your mind, like a whisper from the past that refuses to be forgotten. The Bell Witch isn't just a tale of ghosts and madness, it's a mirror, reflecting the deepest fears we all carry. What would you do if your own family became the subject of a legend? As I close this chapter, I wonder, what legacy do you leave behind? A tale to be told, or a secret that will never be spoken? But don't worry, dear listener, there are plenty more stories waiting for you just around the next corner or under the next floorboard. Until then, stay warm, stay curious, and never let the dark take you completely. You've heard of places that whisper, but this place hums. The Priory of Sion, a medieval fortress turned ruin, swallowed by time and rumor. It's said the stones still remember. Nestled in the hills of France, it's a place where the past doesn't stay buried. Some say the wind carries voices through its ancient archways, echoing like a ghost's lullaby. But what really sets it apart? The stories, the disappearances, the strange happenings that refuse to fade. It's not just a building, it's a memory that refuses to let go. And now, you're here. You've stepped into the silence of the Priory. You're not sure if you're alone or if the silence is listening. So, what do you hear? The echo of footsteps? The whisper of a forgotten name? Or maybe just the sound of your own breath in the dark? You see, it all began in the 12th century, when a certain Lord de Sion decided to build a stone fortress in the hills of France. He was a man of ambition and secrets, and he built this place not just to guard his lands, but to guard his family's legacy. The Priory was a place of both power and mystery. It housed monks, scholars, and a line of noble blood that would one day become the subject of legend. But the real story begins with the first stone laid by the hands of men who believed in something far greater than themselves. It was said that the Priory was built on sacred ground, where the earth itself pulsed with ancient energy. The monks who lived there believed they were protecting something, perhaps a secret, perhaps a soul, or perhaps a truth that had been buried for centuries. Over the years, the Priory became more than a fortress. It became a sanctuary for knowledge, a refuge for the persecuted, and, in the end, a place where the past refused to stay buried. And so, the story of the Priory of Sion began not with ghosts, but with people, ambition, and the quiet, persistent hum of something waiting beneath the stones. You know how sometimes the air feels just a little heavier, like the world has paused to listen? That's what happened the morning they found the first body. The silence was so thick you could almost taste it. The locals said it was an accident, but the hand wasn't just anywhere, it was in a circle, just like the others. You can almost hear the whispers in the wind, like the earth itself is remembering. The next day, the second body was found near the old well. The sheriff said it was a fall, but the way the body was positioned, like it had been pulled down, made the hair on your neck stand up. The third one was found in the chapel, not far from where the first priest had been buried. You can imagine how the silence in that place grew heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. By the time the fourth body was found, the town had started to whisper, not about the deaths, but about the ones who had vanished without a trace. You could almost feel the weight of their absence. You remember the old stories about the Priory of Sion, don't you? The ones that whispered of secrets buried beneath its stone walls. But what if the truth was far more chilling than the legends? In 1974, a young woman named Clara Bennett vanished without a trace. She was last seen walking through the priory's cloister, her footsteps echoing like a ghost in the silence. Her body was never found, but the monks began to disappear too, each one vanishing in the dead of night, leaving behind only their silence and a single, unspoken fear. The priory fell into ruin, its secrets sealed beneath centuries of dust and time. But the echoes of Clara's disappearance still linger, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. I remembered the way the wind howled through the broken archways, like it was trying to carry a secret away. One visitor swore she heard a child's laughter echoing from the stone walls, but when she turned, there was no one there. Another claimed she saw a woman in a white dress walking the path behind the priory, her head bowed, her footsteps silent. But when she followed, the path was empty and the dress was gone. A caretaker once told me about the singing stones, a deep, resonant sound that comes from the walls at midnight. He said it was like the priory itself was whispering a forgotten prayer. The most unsettling story came from a nun who stayed there for a year. She said the walls were never still, and that the silence was filled with voices, not of people, but of something older, something waiting. Some say the priory holds more than just memories, it holds the weight of the past, and the past is never quiet. We followed the trail of whispers through the crumbling remains of the priory, where time had settled like dust on old bones. Every stone seemed to hold a secret, and every shadow felt like a silent witness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something older, something that clung to the walls like a memory. You could almost hear it just out of reach. We found journals, not in the way of treasure, but in the way of truth, pages filled with voices long silenced, names that had faded from history, but not from the earth. There were no bodies, no graves, just echoes of lives that had been lived and lost. And somehow, they still remembered. The investigation didn't end with answers, it ended with questions that would haunt us long after we left the prairies' cold, silent halls. You know, the thing that really haunts me about this place isn't the ghosts or the whispers. It's the one detail that just doesn't add up. The missing piece in the puzzle that no one seems to want to talk about. They say the last keeper of the priory vanished without a trace. But what they don't tell you is that the day she disappeared, the bell tower stopped ringing. No one knows why. Not even the monks. There's a journal locked in a glass case that never gets open. It was left by the last keeper. The monks say it's too dangerous. But what if the danger isn't in the words, it's in the silence they're keeping? You think you're here for the ghosts, but maybe you're here for the truth. And the truth, my friends, is often the most terrifying thing of all. You've heard the stories, but have you ever asked why the Priory of Sion still lingers in the minds of these small town folks? It's not just the stone walls or the old chapel, it's the way the wind whispers through the trees like it's carrying a secret. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Some say the Priory's ghost is a woman in a blue dress, seen only at dusk, her face obscured by the mist. Others swear they heard her laugh echo from the ruins long after the sun had set. Theories range from a lost lover's spirit to a curse placed on the land by a jealous noble. But the locals know one thing for sure, the Priory doesn't just haunt the stones, it haunts the hearts of those who live near it. Some say the best way to find out the truth is to stay overnight. But I've heard of people who left and never returned. The Priory doesn't just hold memories, it holds people. So next time you're in town, don't just pass by the Priory. Listen! The wind, the trees, the stones, they all have something to say. And sometimes, the silence is the most frightening sound of all. And so, the Priory of Sion remains a place where the past refuses to stay buried. You might wonder what could have happened in those stone walls that still lingers, whispering in the wind. No bodies were ever found. No clear answers, just a mystery that has haunted both the land and the hearts of those who seek truth. Perhaps the Priory holds more than just history, it holds the memory of a life that was lost, a truth that was hidden, and a silence that refuses to be broken. Even now, in the quiet of the evening, if you listen closely, you might hear the echo of a voice calling for help, though no one is there to answer. The Priory of Sion is not just a place, it's a question, and we are all just waiting for the answer. You can feel it, can't you? That lingering whisper in the silence, the way the air seems to hold its breath just a moment longer than it should. It's not just the place, it's the people, the stories, the lives that once filled these halls. They're still here, waiting for someone to listen. And sometimes, when the world is quiet and the heart is still, you might just hear it, a faint echo, a name, a sound that doesn't belong. So, my dear friends, I'll leave you with that. With the silence, the stillness, and the sense that someone is watching. But don't worry, we have more tales to tell. And this time, it's one that's waiting just for you. You've heard of the Pyrenees, but have you ever wondered what lies beneath the stone walls of Carcassonne? This is a city where time folds in on itself, and the past doesn't stay buried. Beneath its cobbled streets and ancient towers, there's a labyrinth of tombs, crypts, and forgotten chapels, places where the air feels heavier and the silence is too loud. Locals whisper of restless spirits, of souls who refuse to let go of their final resting place. Some say the tombs are cursed, others that they're simply waiting for someone to listen. But what if the real mystery isn't the ghosts, but the people who came before us and the secrets they left behind in the cold, silent dark? You know, the real story of Carcassonne starts with a man named Raymond de Toulouse, a noble who loved his wife so much he built this city to keep her safe. But love can be cruel, and so was the war that came next. Raymond was a brave knight, but he was also a man who made enemies. The King of France wanted his land, and the Pope wanted to bring him back to Rome. So the city became a battlefield, and people suffered. But here's the thing, dear listener, what happened after the war? The city was rebuilt, but the ghosts of the past never left. Some say the spirits of the dead still wander these stone corridors, searching for peace. And so, Carcassonne became more than a city, it became a tomb, not just for the dead, but for the stories of those who lived and died here. The history is rich, but the mystery is deeper. Now, as we step into the next chapter, we're not just walking through history, we're walking through the echoes of lives once lived, and the lingering sorrow of those who never found rest. You remember the first time you noticed something wasn't quite right. It was the way the wind whispered through the stones, like it was trying to say something you couldn't quite hear. Then came the faint sound of laughter echoing from the hollows between the tombs, like the voices of children playing long ago but never leaving. Then the light changed. It wasn't just the sun setting. It was as if the darkness itself had moved in, thick and slow like a living thing. And finally, the air grew colder, even in the middle of summer. You could feel it, like the tomb itself was breathing, and not in a peaceful way. You followed the whispers through the crumbling stone, past the moss-laced archways, and now we stand at the edge of the Carcassonne crypt. A chill lingers in the air, like the memory of a prayer unspoken. What if the missing were never truly gone? The last recorded sighting of the missing girl was here, in the early hours of a moonless night. Her mother swore she heard a child's laughter echoing through the vaults, though no one else could. Did she hear the voice, or did she hear the silence? The town has long tried to forget, but the crypt doesn't forget. It holds its breath, waiting. What would you do if you knew the past had a way of finding you, even in the quietest corners of the earth? There's something about the way the wind moves through these stones, like it's carrying a story only the dead can hear. What if the missing girl is still here, whispering from the cold, waiting for someone to listen? And so we linger, not because we're brave, but because we're curious. Because sometimes the truth is more terrifying than the mystery. What would you do if the crypt whispered your name in the dark? I remember the first time I heard the whispers in the chapel. It wasn't loud, just a soft, lingering sound, like someone was breathing just behind the altar. The caretaker said it was the wind, but I saw the shape of a woman in the glass, her face half lit, half veiled in shadow, watching me from the other side. One evening I was alone, and the whispers grew louder. They weren't just voices, they were memories, like the past was trying to reach through the stones. I turned, and the whispers stopped. For a moment, I thought I saw her, just a flash of movement, a figure in the distance, almost like she was waiting for me to follow. I never told anyone, but I still hear them sometimes. The past doesn't stay buried, does it? It just waits for the right moment to speak. We followed the trail of whispers to the old catacombs beneath the cathedral, where the air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something older, something that had been waiting. The guide, a grizzled local, warned us that the tombs had a will of their own, that they had claimed more than one curious soul who had dared to listen too closely. As we opened the first door, we found not bones, but a mirror, cracked and covered in what looked like dried blood, though we all knew it was just the dust of centuries. Then came the sound, a whisper, just at the edge of hearing, like someone breathing just behind us, but not quite there. It was the kind of sound that makes your skin prickle, even if you know it's just the wind. We left the tombs with more questions than answers, but we also left with the feeling that we had been watched, not by the dead, but by something else entirely. You know, the thing that has never been explained is the missing locket, that tiny silver thing with a heart, found in the dust of the chapel, but no one knows who it belonged to or why it was left behind. It's not just missing, it's like it was forgotten, as if the person who wore it had a moment of clarity and then just vanished. No trace, no name, no record. Some say it's a trick of the light, but others say it's a message left behind by someone who knew the end was near. And no one dares to ask the question that keeps coming back: what if the locket was never meant to be found? That's the mystery, you see, not of the ghosts, but of the thing that was left behind. The locket, the heart, the silence. It's like the tomb itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to ask the right question. You've heard the tales, But did you know the locals still gather in the shadow of the castle to whisper about the tombs? They say the bones don't rest, and the wind carries their cries. Some say the spirits are the ghosts of the condemned, trapped in their own tombs, waiting for someone to uncover their final secret. Others believe they're the souls of the builders, cursed by their own hands. And then there is the theory that the tombs are not just graves, but portals, doors to another world, where time folds in on itself and the dead walk among the living. Still others insist the curses are real, and that the tombs are a warning, a reminder that even in death, some sins refuse to be buried. So next time you're in Carcassonne, you might want to ask the locals, just don't be the one who opens the wrong tomb. You know, sometimes the most haunting stories aren't about what happened, but what never did. And in Carcassonne, the mystery of the missing bodies still clings to the stones like a whisper from the past. For decades, authorities have scoured the region, but the bodies never surfaced. It's as if the earth itself decided to protect those who were taken, or perhaps they were never really taken at all. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Some say the land itself is cursed, a silent witness to the unsolved crimes that still echo through the stones. Others believe the missing were never meant to be found because they were never meant to be lost. And so, the mystery lingers like a ghost in the architecture, a secret in the stones. It's not just about what happened in Carcassonne, but what the stones still refuse to tell us. Perhaps the true horror is not in the missing bodies, but in the fact that their story is still unfinished. And that, my dear, is where the real ghost lies. You know, sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest echoes. I wonder what whispers might still linger in the stones of Carcassonne. These tombs aren't just ruins, they're memories, waiting to be heard. And some memories refuse to stay buried. As you turn the page, remember, the past is never truly gone. It just waits for the right moment to speak. And now, dear listener, let's turn the page to a tale that will stay with you long after the fire has died down. You've heard of shipwrecks, but have you ever heard of a ship that vanished without a sound? The SS Valentia was a passenger liner, sleek and white, bound for a quiet port in the early 1900s. But then, one foggy night, it just disappeared. Some say the sea swallowed it whole, others claim it was taken by a ghostly force. What we do know is that no one survived, not a single soul. The Valentia vanished with its passengers, and with it, the last whispers of mystery that still lingers in the deep. You might think it's just a tale for the curious, but some say the sea remembers. Some say the Valentia still floats in the dark, waiting for the right moment to return and take someone with it. So, if you're listening, you might just be the one the Valentia is waiting for. Or maybe you're already on its path, and you just don't know it yet. So, the SS Valentia wasn't just any old ship, it was a luxury liner, a floating palace on the Atlantic, and it carried more than just passengers. It carried dreams, letters, and secrets. And then, one foggy morning in 1920, it vanished. Its captain, Charles G. Hare, was a man of quiet confidence and meticulous routine. He had sailed the Atlantic many times before, but this trip would be his last. No one knew it yet. The storm came without warning. The weather reports had said nothing of the sudden squall, and by the time it hit, the Valentia was caught in a wall of wind and rain, its lights flickering like a dying fire. What happened next remains a mystery. Some say the ship was torn apart by the waves, others claim it was swallowed whole by the sea. But the truth, like the ship itself, has vanished into the fog. And so, the story of the SS Valentia became a legend, a tale of ambition, misfortune, and the sea's cruel appetite for secrets. But the real question is, was it a ship, or was it a ghost? You know how sometimes the air just feels different, like the world has paused for a moment? That's what it was like that night. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, and your breath catch in your throat. The crew noticed at first this strange stillness, like the sea had forgotten how to move. It wasn't the usual calm before a storm, but something else, something deeper. Like the ocean itself was holding its breath. They tried to laugh it off, to pretend they were just being superstitious. But the ship didn't laugh. It grew colder, the lanterns dimmed, and the crew started to vanish one by one without a sound, without a trace. And then, the last one, a captain who never left his cabin. They found him in the morning, curled up in a chair, staring out the window. His eyes were open, but he didn't blink, just stared, like he was waiting for something or someone. So, you're wondering now what happened to the Valentia? What's out there, in that still, silent sea? And why do some people say, to this day, that if you look too long into the water, you'll see them waiting for you? You see it now, the deck of the SS Valentia, the last time anyone saw the passengers alive. The sea is calm, the sky a pale, watery gray, and the ship moves like a dream through the mist. Then, the silence. The crew was last seen heading below deck, and the passengers, like the crew, vanished without a sound. No screams, no shouts. Just a moment, and then nothing. Some say the ship was never lost at sea. Some say it was never built. But the people who vanished on the Valentia, they're still here, in the fog, in the silence, in the spaces between the waves. And now you're left with the question, was it the sea that took them, or something else? Something that still waits in the dark for the next soul to cross its path. I spoke to a retired shipbuilder in New Jersey who said the Valentia was built with a secret curse. He swore the keel was laid on a night of blood and thunder, and the workers whispered prayers to keep the ship from drowning. One survivor, a woman in her 80s, told me the Valentia didn't just disappear, it vanished mid-sail, as if it had been pulled under by some unseen force. She said the sea was calm, the sky clear, and the crew just gone. Another witness, a former sailor, claimed the Valentia had a voice. He said the ship called to him in the dark, whispering his name, until he woke up on the shore, alone and shaking, with no memory of how he got there. There are still people who say the Valentia hasn't gone. They claim it waits in the Atlantic, like a ghost in the deep, waiting for the right storm, the right sailor, and the right moment to call again. We followed the trail of old shipping logs and found a dock in New Bedford that still smells of brine and memory. The wood is weathered, the ropes frayed, and the air holds the scent of something long gone. The keeper of the dock, a retired sailor with a sharp eye and a sharper memory, told us about the Valentia's last voyage. He said the crew vanished without a sound, like they'd never been there at all. The symbol led us to a forgotten chapel on the edge of town, where the priest said the ship's captain had made a deal with the sea. He spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid the ghosts would hear. We found a ledger in the chapel's basement, filled with names and dates, some of them matching the Valentia's crew, but the entries ended abruptly, as if the ink had been wiped away by an unseen hand. The final clue was a faded photograph in the captain's old home. It showed a man who looked nothing like the man in the ledger, and behind him, standing in the shadows, was a figure that didn't belong. You know, the thing that's always bugged me about the Valentia is this one little detail that's just gone. No one seems to know where the ship's log went after it vanished. It's like a whole mystery got swallowed by the sea, along with the crew. The last entry in that log was made on the night of the disappearance. It just ends there, like the ink ran out or someone took it. No last words, no final clue, just silence. Some say the log was lost in the storm. Others say it was taken by the crew themselves. Maybe they were hiding something. But no one can prove it. And that's what makes it so haunting. You think about that log, and you realize it's not just missing. It's like the ship's voice was stolen. And without it, the Valentia's story just fades away. So here's the thing. The log is gone, and that's the one detail that's never been explained. And maybe that's the real ghost of the Valentia. The silence where the story should be. You've heard the names, but do you know the faces? Some say the Valentia's ghosts still roam the docks, not in rage, but in longing. They're not angry, they're just waiting for someone to remember them. Local fishermen swear they've seen the silhouette of a ship on the horizon, only to vanish when they try to get a closer look. They say it's not the Valentia, it's something else, something older. Some say the ship was cursed the moment it left port. Others believe the captain made a deal with the sea, and the sea kept its end of the bargain. The real tragedy? No one ever knew the truth. Even now, in the quiet of the evening, the waves whisper secrets. The Valentia is not just a ship, it's a story, a memory, a warning. And somewhere, someone is still listening. You know, some mysteries don't just fade away, they cling to the edges of our minds like a half-remembered dream. The Valentia's story is one of those. We've traced every name, every clue, every whisper from the past, but still, the ship vanishes like a ghost in a fog. What's left to uncover? Perhaps the answer lies not in the sea, but in the silence that followed. What did the crew truly see? And why did no one ever speak of it? We may never know the full truth, but that's what makes it so haunting. It's quiet, lingering uncertainty. And that's why it still haunts us. So I'll leave you with this. The Valentia never truly vanished. It just waited for someone to listen. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something to enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dot smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Before you go, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell us in the comments what you'd like us to make next. We read every single one. Thank you so much for watching. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.